All right, welcome back to, well, I don't know what we're going to call this. It's some sort of segment that I'm going to start doing. I guess I need to come up with a catchy name, but for now, welcome back to the Possibility Storm. This is the YouTube channel that I run that focuses mostly on competitive EDH, but we do talk about competitive Pauper EDH because I play that as well. I had a conversation with Clay of the cPDH.guide and Rules Committee guy. And, you know, Me11, we've probably seen him around. I've had him on stream before. He's going to be playing Sidebar. This guy, who's David, which I haven't even gotten to introducing yet because I like to ramble. Him and myself and Clay from all that stuff I just mentioned are going to be playing on my stream on the 14th, which is my normal Tuesday stream time at 4 p.m. Pacific. But yeah, we're going to be playing some games, so you'll see him again. But point being, Clay has kind of cornered the market, so to speak, on this winners of tournaments and doing interviews with them and getting to know the person, how they got into PDH, how they came about, you know, picking their deck, etc., etc. So it's kind of a personal get to knowing the person more so than like talking about the tournament or talking about the decks. I've done a couple of these. The last time I had David on, he was a finalist in, I think it was Sanctuary 3. I scrubbed out of that one, so I kind of didn't have a whole lot to contribute. It was mostly talking with these guys about their success. And then Gator was on because he was the winner of that particular tournament. And, well, it's not something that I've been very consistent with. I've only done a couple of them, and it was mainly because I participated in those particular tournaments. I did miss Sanctuary 4. I have not done any of the Common Causes or Rags to Riches or any of those. Some of them are in person, and it's just too far for me to get to. Some of them have just conflicted with my schedule at work. I wasn't able to come home and yada get ready in time. Notably, the next Sanctuary, number 5, is coming up this month in a couple weeks. It's actually right after that stream, so we're going to do some tournament-level streaming prior to jumping on that actual tournament, and I will be able to participate in that one because they shoved the start time way back, so it's perfect for me. So, yeah, hopefully going forward I'll be able to do that, and I'm, again, with Clay kind of cornering the market on the whole talking to the winner about themselves and their histories and all that stuff. We kind of had a conversation, and he thought it was a good idea, and I agreed that maybe as sort of a sister thing to his episode. So I will put in the show notes an episode to the interview that's already happened. It's already live. David shared quite a bit about what happened with him in that tournament and, you know, him as a person, brewer, etc. So you guys should definitely go check that out, watch that. Actually, you could pause this now, go watch that first, because this is kind of a follow-up. We're going to try and plan these a little better in the future to where they release, you know, sort of, not necessarily side-by-side, but at least within a day of each other so that you can get both ends of the interview. But this is basically more of a focus, not to take away from David as a player, but less of a focus on David and more of a focus on his deck. Because we thought it would be cool, especially because in this particular instance, I had never seen this deck played ever, anywhere. So seeing it be played, because I did manage to catch the VOD, the final, and seeing what it could do, it was just interesting, and it's cool to get more of the sort of information out. And I kind of wanted to have like a snapshot in time for people who are winning these tournaments and their tournament winning decks so that like we can see how it was when it was the winning deck, and it's not going to change because I'm going to take a copy of that, put it on mine, and it'll be in the show notes as well, and it'll be that forever the winning deck of that tournament, whatever the case may be. So this is speaking of the Common Cause, right? 3, I believe?
Cause 3, yep.
And that's the one that's run by Chris from OMG and a couple other people. I think it's the Trivia Encounters group, and then I want to say somebody else I cannot recall off the top of my head right now, but it's a thing that they've been running. It's another online tournament similar to Sanctuary, similar sort of entry fee, similar sort of amount of players, yada yada. So a very similar sort of thing, so I at least kind of understand how the whole structure is and how that's worked. But again, I haven't been able to make one just because of timing and all that. So, spoilers, David, Ankylosaur, however you want to say it, he was the big winner, and I thought that was pretty cool to see because I saw him play against several other people that were winners in several finals, and then he was just the one that fell short, and so finally got the big dub. Congratulations, that's awesome. And to do it with a deck that nobody saw coming is even more impressive, because most people seem to have kind of settled into a few decks, and that's kind of what the tournament meta has been outside of a few shakeups. And to see something come in that was essentially unknown. It reminded me of like a cDH tournament a couple years back where Magda came into the tournament and was like, what? And then 4-0'd and went to the finals and won, and it was just like, holy shit, how did that happen? So it's kind of a very similar thing here, and I thought that was cool. So we definitely want to talk about it. So, David, welcome back. You have been here before, but I did not corner you into telling me about your sordid past with Magic the Gathering. So if you wouldn't mind, it is tradition here. I like to talk about it when I have guests on. I do this normally on my podcast, but again, this is going to be some sort of new segment. I'm going to figure out a title. We'll get to that, but work in progress. Still, anytime I'm going to have anybody on here, they're going to tell me how they got into Magic and just give us a quick rundown of, like, you know, from point A to point B, your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And
appreciate it.
I'm glad that I get to talk to you as a winner this time.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure that feels good. I'm waiting for my first one. Maybe Sanctuary 5 will be my time to shine.
Oh, you'll get there. You'll get there. Yeah, you'll get there for sure. Yeah, I started playing Magic when I was about 10 years old. I was in 5th grade. 4th edition was the newest set. So okay. I'm an old man.
You're around my age. I started in 94, 95, but I was also probably around 10 years old. I was like 12-ish then. No idea how to play. You bought booster packs, and it was what is this? You had to buy one of those little boxes that had the little tiny rule book, which I wish I had one of those. Those were so cool.
I read those tiny rule books cover to cover so many times, just like driving to school, you know, in the backseat. My mom's in the car, and like I'm just trying to learn how to play, like what an enchantment is. How does that even work? I did a lot of that. Yeah, so I had a fair bit of 4th edition. Ice Age was like the first big expansion to come out after that.
Ice Age. So
got a lot of Ice Age. Fallen Empires was like $1 a pack.
Legends was around out then, and some of the other Chronicles and whatnot that were just
was a little bit before my time. Yeah,
I just remember you could get like Ice Age was big, and then you could still get those other packs of Fallen Empires, like you said, and they were nothing to pay for back then. So it was just like I had all these random cards and had no idea what any of them did. I remember being hypnotized by the art anyway. But continue.
Yeah, the old school art was definitely a huge factor of like getting into the game. Like, you know, I collected. I've always kind of collected stuff. I was into sports cards, like baseball cards and stuff.
I started that way too.
Yeah, Ninja Turtles when I was a little kid. You know, had action figures and stuff. But always wanted to collect stuff. And when I found out you could also play a game with these things that I'm collecting, sold.
That blew my mind. It was like, this is a game? What? Huh?
Yeah.
But then we were dumb and played, you know, sleeveless on concrete and just rippled all of our cards. Anyhow.
So anyways, I started then and played just pretty casually, lots of kitchen table stuff. I remember I would go to pre-releases, and pre-releases back in the day were like just giant sealed tournaments. I remember playing in like had to have been at least 150 people for the Invasion pre-release. Just massive sealed tournament. There weren't spoilers like there are today, so like everybody was just kind of going in without knowing what the cards were.
I think you might have been able to get spoilers kind of with like what Wizard or I can't remember all the magazines back then, but there were some of them that also, you know, did some of the tracking of the card prices and stuff. And I had been familiar with some of those because prior to Magic, I was collecting like comic book cards like Marvel Universe, Masterpiece, whatever the hell. And I was super into that and thought I was going to make myself rich off of it and all that. And turns out Magic was the better investment, and I didn't even know it, but I digress.
Oh yeah, I had a bunch of Marvel cards as well. Love those.
I still have binders in the closet. They're sitting there. I
still have them somewhere. Yeah.
I've actually tried to look around to see if they were worth anything yet, and they're not. I think we're going to be very old men before they might have somebody our age that's like 75 and has some liquid might be like, yeah, I'll give you like $200 for all of them.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. I mean, I've used them as tokens before, like some of them, you know, like Archangel. That's a good angel token.
Yeah,
things like that. So played pretty casually. You know, I was a kid. I couldn't afford the top decks, and I would play a little bit of Type 2, which was what they called standard back then. But for the most part, it was pretty casual. And then I went off to school and didn't play for like 5 years. Most of the modern era, I stopped. Probably Apocalypse was like my last set. Came back and went to the original Zendikar pre-release. Was my first tournament back, and
That's like what, 2007?
2009ish,
Okay.
2009ish. Yeah,
I was out for a big chunk of time in there too. It was like from I want to say I played through Odyssey and like whatever came out, after that. It's like 03, maybe 04
Sure.
at the very end, and then I didn't play again until Kaladesh. So there was like huge chunks of I had no idea. And when I came back, it was a lot to pick up again. But it was fun to pour through all the old lists, that are online and just see what's out there. And obviously, when you finally discover Commander, you have to look at everything and you start seeing cards you didn't know existed. And that's one of the best parts of Eternal formats, I think, is the ability to look back at all those cards and almost everything's legal. Because the ban list is comparably to the card pool is very, very small.
That's a good segue, actually, because before I got into Commander, my first real love was Pauper, which is one of those non-rotating formats. And my Magic budget isn't as large as some people's. Sure. I can't afford to play Legacy. I got into Modern a little bit because I could build a couple of cheap decks, but then the cheap decks wound up not competing very well against the meta decks. So
I mean, it's kind of the same story with every format, really. I mean, Standard, not as much, but there have been times where there's that one chase card you need 4 of, and they're like 30, 40 bucks a piece. Modern's even worse because it's like get these fetch lands, and for a long time they weren't getting reprinted, so it was like $40 fetch land you need 4 of, and then you need another 4 of, and this and that, and then on top of that, your Tarmogoyfs were however much, and I've heard stories. And then Legacy is probably on par or worse than cEDH, but cEDH is like, I can't keep up with it anymore. And like, if you didn't buy, or luckily enough to pull a 1 ring, now you got to pay $60, $80 for it. So, do I want to do that, or should I pay my gas bill?
Yeah. But Pauper's where it's at. Like, the power level is surprisingly high. I've heard it described as kind of Legacy with bad mana, but the spells are really good. The threats are medium-ish, but like, we'll still get the job done. I don't know. When I discovered Pauper, I was all in on that. I really loved that format. And since I wasn't playing Commander at the time, I had a bunch of like random Commander staples just from, again, being a kid in the 90s. Stuff like, I had some Burgeonings, which at the time were like $20. And I was like, if I trade in these to the LGS, I can get artifact lands, which I didn't have because I wasn't playing during Mirrodin. I can get some Snuff Outs. I can get Chainer's Edicts, which were at the time were like $6-7 a piece. So I just accumulated all of these Pauper staples and eventually kind of traded my way into owning most of the format.
It was something that if you were lucky enough to play 10 plus years ago, a lot of the stuff that's staples now in any format was a lot cheaper. And it was even all the way up until basically the pandemic. The pandemic turned the whole thing on its head. And it got to the point where pretty much it priced out most people, normal people that don't just have thousands of dollars to spend. And that is where myself and other people did turn to, like, Pauper. I can actually buy the whole damn deck and it's under $100, and like, I'm not just buying one card. It's great. So
yeah, absolutely. The gameplay is wonderful. I'm a big fan. It's the sort of power level that I enjoy, where you're not just slamming 1 rings and Shieldrids and like
it doesn't have the same sort of bombs, but it does have bombs for its own, for its power level. I like to think of it as kind of like it's somewhere in between competitive EDH and casual EDH, because it has like the lower power level of regular casual decks, but then just because of the restriction on your deck building, but then it has, at least in tournaments and with people who actually do play competitively, it has the mindset of cEDH. So it's like that kind of helped me kind of switch over to it, because it was like, it initially kind of felt like, this is Battlecruiser, this is terrible, like we're just putting shit out and swinging and like nothing's happening. And then you end up finding the decks that can combo off, and like, shit, when I pulled out a turn 4 win in a Pauper pod, I felt pretty good about that. So it's like, okay, I see both ends of it, and I kind of like that it is a middle ground, and it's not expensive. It's real easy to get other people into because everybody's got commons laying around. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
When I get into a format, I tend to build extra decks just so I can lend them out. And I did that was 60 card Pauper at my LGS. I got some friends into it and was just like, hey, I have all these commons laying around. I can build most anything that anybody wants to play. If you're interested in like playing Burn this week or Dimir Fairies or the Golgari Garden Stack, just let me know. I can swap some things around, update it to the most recent list, and we can play 60 card Pauper.
Right.
Same thing with Pauper EDH. I just have years of collection and can introduce people to the format that way. And I really love doing that. Making sure that my cards aren't just sitting in a box, that people are actually going to get to play with them. And hopefully the people that I introduce to the format will love it as much as I do, and we can start a regular thing at the game store. So
yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in the middle of doing something similar. I've got some coworkers that it randomly turned out like one guy was talking about Magic, and it's come up before in conversation that I do the YouTube thing. And then we kind of found out like slowly but surely, like, oh, this guy plays and this guy plays. And it turns out some of them were going to the LGS that's down the street from my house that I had gone to lots of times and never saw people playing, but I guess I just didn't go at the right time or whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. But essentially they said, yeah, people play there. And just yesterday I was there, but unfortunately they are all sort of new. Some of them have more experience than others, but they're sort of new, so they're not like really playing competitively. They're playing very casual. But I feel like this is going to be a good segue into maybe trying to get them to try some Pauper. So I have a couple decks made in paper, but I'm going to make some more and see if I can't try and push that too, because it still has that same sort of, like I said, kind of that on that power level of casual, to where it's not just instant 2-card win cons and all this stuff. There's nothing too super oppressive, but it might be something that can happen. So yeah, I get what you're saying there, and I like that idea of trying to spread it. And then that's what we're doing here too, is just trying to talk about the format more, show off gameplay, whatever, try to get more people involved. And I do see new people popping in on Sanctuary and other places all the time. So people are doing the work, and it's happening. It's a slow growth, and as long as it's steady, eventually it will be, popular enough. Maybe there will be more tournaments and more content creators and all of that.
For sure.
So eventually you found EDH. Did you play much comp or anything else, or did you just kind of run straight into Pauper?
I've played a very little bit of cEDH. Was able to like scrape together a Kinnan deck with some proxies. I've played Winota before too, but like those are...
Now you're speaking my language.
Those are like the two decks that I have any experience with. There was a place fairly near me that was running tournaments. The scene was like, I don't know. Let's just say I didn't always get along with the people who were playing there. So I didn't make it a regular thing, but it was fun. It was fun enough that I realized that I enjoy the competitive level of EDH. And when I eventually found Pauper EDH, and that there was a competitive scene to it, and that there was just a diversity of things that you could play combo, you could play aggro decks and mid-range. Like there were a lot of different options to play. Like that's a thing that really appeals to me.
It is diverse, and it's very far from being solved. There's so many commander options. Yeah. What is it, like 1,000 more than what is it available in other EDH formats, at least? So, like, just with the uncommon legendaries, I think it's like 300 or 400, and then there's like, 1,000 extra on top of that with uncommon creatures, maybe more. I don't even know, because Magic's a big game. Whatever the case, there's a ton of options. We've had arguments before too. There's people out there that have said, cEDH is solved even, just because Blue Farm's the best, and then there's like a couple of these other decks that are really good, and like nothing's gonna ever beat those, and blah blah blah. And like obviously they're not winning every single tournament, but just from a on paper standpoint, this is objectively the best. So the format's solved, and I call bullshit on that. There's always new stuff coming out and new ways to break things, and things that can be made better because some new card gets printed. And I think Pauper is even more Wild West than, the comp scene. Just being able to use any uncommon creatures, it just opens up weird options that don't exist, because legendaries are always printed in a way that they have, XYZ things on them, and it's always like, I don't want to say more impactful, because obviously there's a lot of non-legendary commanders that have won tournaments, like this Copa's your card here that we're going to talk about, like several others that are just not legendary creatures that have put in work and done a lot. So far from solved. To your point too about going to the LGS, playing some of a format that you thought was cool but you didn't really care for the crowd, I get that. You get that online too. You're not going to get along with everybody. I will say that when I started getting more involved with the Pauper community, they were 1,000 times more friendly and open and able to listen. I mean, there are still those naysayers that are like, that card's trash, or oh, that strategy's bad, or oh, stickers suck. But, there's still people like you, me, and other people that are still willing to try those things, even though people will say it sucks. And, sometimes you do good, sometimes you don't. Whatever the case, I do feel like the community is very, very nice for the most part.
And above board, too. Like, when I say I didn't always get along with the cEDH crowd, it was more like there were a couple of people that took the competitiveness to levels of, like...
being an asshole.
So somebody told me after the match that he could see my hand in the reflection of my glasses and was like using that to his advantage. And I was like,
shitty. Why would you say that during the game, man?
Yeah, I was like, I understand that like you're trying to get every edge possible, but like maybe that's an edge that you don't need, right?
Shame on that guy. Shame on that guy.
So, anyways, yeah. To your point, the Pauper community, I've really loved. There's so many people that I've become friends with and really value the time that we spend together, playing games and talking over Discord. And like, I don't know, it's been a really welcoming group of people.
A lot of that could be because it's small. We haven't attracted a ton of those assholes, but it is what it is. I do enjoy the camaraderie that the smaller group has had. And there's a lot of known people, and then the other people that are newer getting involved, and some of them have turned out to be really cool. And I mean, that other person that was in the final with you, Hive, I've only interacted with them like once or twice. I don't think they've been on the Sanctuary server for all that long. I could be wrong. Maybe they've been in other servers as well. I'm not entirely sure because, again, only a couple interactions. But someone who made a deck and took it to a final, so new people can pop in and do things. And you also said yourself that you've only been in the competitive scene for like a year now. So
about a year,
yeah, anybody can pop in, and your varied experiences, even people like me. You play cEDH, you still have a sense of how the game is played. It's just, learning the card pool and learning the threats and things, which does admittedly take some time, but anybody can do it. And to the point about not really enjoying playing cEDH with people, I play cEDH on my server all the time. You're welcome to join. We have friendly guys, and we try to be new player friendly to the point where like I will remind people of triggers, or like say, hey, don't do that. That's a bad call. Do this instead. That kind of stuff. So not to say that we know everything, but we all have a combined experience of a long time, so it works out. So you eventually got to EDH comp. Then you found that there was the Pauper variant, so you could do the 60 card things you love, try to transfer that over to the multiplayer EDH experience. Any particular reason that you got involved, or you just saw it on a forum somewhere, or a social media site?
It was just one of those random things where some of the people that I play with at my LGS, like one day they all kind of showed up with Pauper EDH decks, and I was like, why did this never occur to me before? Like, I love Pauper. I've been playing some Commander. Why not just take my two interests and put them together? And they played it a little bit. Like, I got super sucked in, and I was like, this is the kind of Magic I want to play. And they played it for a few weeks and were like, well, we did that. That was fun.
And you're like, no, I need a play group.
I got super into it. And then I saw that RIW Hobbies, it's a game store maybe 4.5 hours from me in Detroit, or just outside Detroit. Mm-hmm. I followed their Facebook because they do 60 card Pauper 1K tournaments, which is there just aren't big Pauper tournaments anywhere really in paper. There's not a whole lot of them. So the fact that they're not prohibitively far from me, and they have tournaments with good prizes, and it's a good turnout. And
it's like a drive to Vegas for me. It's 4 hours, and I've done that for conventions. So that sounds great.
Yeah. So seeing that they were doing a Pauper EDH 1K last year, that was the moment. I was like, this is a format I need to learn and I need to get into and really, up my game, because I was 100% going to go to that. I love these formats that are small, community driven, haven't been solved yet. Everyone is just kind of trying new things, and that's the kind of Magic I like to play. So RIW was it was my first Pauper tournament, my first Pauper EDH tournament. Yeah. And I built Aaron a Street Urchin for that kind of by myself. I didn't know there was a Discord or several Discords, or that there was an online community at all, really. Like I saw
Mhm.
Decklist that people had posted, and that there had been some tournaments, and I was like, okay, well, I can learn the decks that have done well at the tournaments just in case they show up. Yeah, I was just kind of building and playing on my own and like just trying some new stuff out. And Airness was a deck that I was excited about the interaction. I really love kind of aristocratic, like sacrifice my own stuff to gain value kind of control decks.
Yeah.
And so I spent a lot of time testing that deck for that tournament.
Yeah, the deck it's good. I've seen a lot of other people. I've considered playing it, but it's not exactly my play style. So it ended up being in goldfishing. I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna like this or have the my problem is the patience. I think really to play it properly. I just want to jam shit out and do stuff, and that can bite you in the ass. And I mean, also that was kind of my experience too. It was just I had heard about Pauper Commander years and years ago. And never played it. And then I had always thought about it because it was like, man, I have all these commons in boxes that just are collecting dust because there's only, X, Y, and Z handful or dozen cards that actually see play in comp or in, the dramatic reversals and things. Yes, those get played, but commons are not very common in the other formats that don't have the restrictions. So I was always like, man, I want to use these cards, and we just kind of messed around with it. And then I made a video because having to do content means trying to always come up with something new to put out there to see what hits and what misses. And early on in the channel, I put out a Pauper video, and it is still to this day my most viewed video for whatever weird reason.
Oh, yeah.
So that was like a year later or so. I was like, kind of scratching my head. It's like, what do I do to make more, get more eyeballs on things? And I was like, man, this Pauper video is super popular. Maybe there's something there. Let's try. And then around that time, I Googled for rules, and that's how I found the home base. And then, I joined that Discord, but didn't really participate much. And then slowly but surely, I decided I was going to start doing Pauper, at least once a month, and then started getting involved with guys that I knew who already played it, like Connoisseurs and Clay and yada yada. And then one thing led to another, and then somebody was like, hey, there's this Sanctuary server and tournaments coming up and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, hey, yeah, fuck it. Joined and started playing a lot with people there, and, I've met a lot of other people, yourself included, and, it's been a really great experience. So the fact that there's now an online community, too, and online tournaments is pretty cool because, not everybody can drive 4 hours on a whim or can go to every single tournament, because if you did, it's getting to a point where there's, like, almost one a month, at least.
Yep.
So that's a lot of travel time if you're not local. So,
sure.
The online stuff is appreciated. But I think that pretty much covers it up to current day. You're now a tournament grinder that has made some influential decks, I'd say. And, obviously have your own channel where you talk about all of this good stuff as well. So I like it. I'm glad that you're another person that's doing that sort of thing, because you've brought... I'd say a unique perspective with your videos compared to some of the rest of us. I think you found your niche, at least, where it's always a little different, but it's always been interesting. With that, that went longer than I expected, but it was nice to hear all the little ins and outs of how you got all the way to where we're at today. Let's talk about this deck. This deck is helmed by Lorehold Appentice, which is back from Strixhaven, and this is one of those uncommon creatures that is not legendary. So it's a red and a white for a 2/2 human cleric that has Magecraft, which is a ability from that set, which basically just says whenever you cast instant or sorcery or copy, which copying doesn't happen as often in this format, but it is still a trigger if you happen to do it. Until end of turn, spirit creatures you control gain tap. This creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. So on its face, that doesn't sound very impressive. And when I think about spirits, because I run a Millicent deck in cEDH, and that's Azoria, so it's blue, which has a lot of spirits, and then white, which has a lot of spirits, and she capitalizes off of having a lot of spirits in the deck, and there are a lot of them that are really pretty decent, but they're uncommon or higher. So I can't think off the top of my head exactly how many impactful spirits there may be, but prior to getting into the nitty gritty of the deck tech itself, I guess the first question would be, what drew you to this commander in particular? Like, because again, on its face, it's not very without going into thought processes of how you would build this deck, it doesn't read super powerful, but it doesn't sound bad either, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I've been pretty high on pingers in the format lately.
Sure.
I think that if you're going to be playing a control deck or a mid-range deck, something that can deal damage to everybody all at once is kind of where you want to be.
Yeah, it's like the Mirkwood
Rather
Bats.
than-
Like, that made Sivris a deck, really.
It's so much better than trying to go to combat, which is one of the things that Arena Street Urchin has always had trouble with. Like, you can control the board, you can shoot stuff down, but eventually you've got to just play some beaters and go to town and
Right.
try and kill people with, like, your Avenging Hunter as a 5/4 or your Oliphant that you've hard cast. And it can be kind of grindy and it takes a while. Whereas with the Pinger plan, you're just going to hit everybody all at once, and you're mostly going to be playing Drago. Like, the first few turns, you're going to, play a Kessig Flame Breather, play a Scorched Salka as a 1-drop. Then you play out your commander, and for much of the rest of the game, you're going to draw a card, you're going to play your land, and you're going to say go. And on somebody's end step, you can cast a cantrip, which will trigger Lorehold Apprentice, turn any spirits that you have in play into a pinger, and then be like, I'll deal 3 damage to the table. I'll deal 4 damage to the table. And then untap and keep going like that. Just holding up your interaction, making sure that you've got removal in hand, protection spells for your creatures. But that's the idea behind the deck, is that I've been really hooked on pingers as a way to close out games lately. And so there's actually, funnily enough, there are more humans in the deck than there are actual spirit creatures, just because I ran all of the good red pingers, as well as Basilica Guards and Syndic of Ties, which are the white extort creatures at common.
Okay.
Just to give extra ways to deal damage to the table, gain a little bit of life back. I think extort is a really fantastic mechanic as well.
Yeah, so, I'd agree with that. And a lot of decks are on pingers. I mean, the Malcolm Kedis I was running had all kinds of pingers. And then, the Larry type decks are running a lot of things that drain, just incidentally. I think repeatable damage in Pauper is actually quite strong. And because those pingers are fairly popular in a number of lists that are, quote unquote proven or seeing a good amount of play right now, there's a lot of them at the table all at once. So you being on that and other people also being on that means everybody's kind of draining everybody. And then it just comes down to who's got the way to finish. And you kind of already answered this in a sense, but my next question was, what's the quote unquote, like the tagline? Like, how do you sell this to someone? And I guess the instant speed interaction and then pinging at the end step is kind of the goal. If you were coming to me, like you said, you had these decks built, you came to the LGS, I'm sitting there, I don't have a deck, and you're like, hey, you want to play? And I'm like, what does this one do? What would you do to like tell me this is why you want to play this, so to speak?
Yeah. It is pretty much Boros pinger control. I did want to touch on something else you said, though, that is, pingers are pretty popular. A lot of people are pinging each other, using that as the win con. And this sort of feeds into that, because with cards like Triplicate Spirits, with cards like Rousing of Souls, I have so many more pingers than the other pinger decks.
That is true.
I can have like 5-6 plus spirits on the table, and
nobody wants to use removal on a plain Jane one drop, unless it's like an Echoing Truth or something where they get rid of all of them.
Right. Yeah. But then, end step, I cast, name a random cantrip or name a random removal spell out of the deck. That turns on all of my things, and I can just be like 6 the table. I can cast an untap spell and do another 6. Like, that's so much damage out of nowhere. So it can close the game. Like, if things are going well, it can close the game like surprisingly quickly.
Prior to knowing what it could do, again, I watched you win with it, but it wasn't, from what I recall, I don't recall there being a lot of that where you had a lot of spirits on the board. I feel like it was kind of a game where that didn't happen.
The finals, I didn't draw any spirits at all.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't remember that being it. So I was like, I really don't even know what this deck does. And looking at it on paper, it's like, okay, I see stuff, but I never thought about, okay, this is end step, Thrill of Possibility. You draw 2 cards, discard a card or whatever, and then you also just inadvertently 6 the table. That's pretty spicy. Because otherwise, the best you'd hope for is maybe a pinger or two, and you to the table, which is obviously a lot worse.
Yeah, and some of the spirits, like spirits, are not a very well supported creature type.
I mean, that is essentially my next question: is what are the key spirits that you actually did choose and why? So, I mean, just going from the top, we've got Frostling. For 1 red, it's a 1/1 that can be sacked to do 1 damage. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory.
1 damage to a creature. Yep. So some of the spirits are in there because they are 1-drops, which a 1-drop on its own, not necessarily that impressive. But when you get attack on tap, deal a damage to each opponent, that's a pretty decent creature. Like, it's like a blister split goblin almost.
Yeah, and being able to sack it just to like take out a gut skeleton that's coming at you or something is
take out a skeleton,
not terrible.
Take out an arbor elf. I can kill a 3rd path iconoclast. Yeah. It has a little bit of utility as well. So it's not the worst card in the world, but when it's also just something I can hold up and tap to deal a damage to everybody, since I'm hitting everyone at the table, that's like 3 damage a turn cycle from my little 1-drop, which not the worst.
No,
not the worst.
So then you've also got Hopeful Eidolon. This is another 1-drop for also a 1/1. It has lifelink, but then you can bestow it for 4. So give something else +1/+1 and lifelink. Now, if you did that on another spirit, say when it pings, it's doing the damage, so you would get the lifelink, correct? So
yes,
this just adds to that.
Yeah, by itself, it's like an extort trigger whenever you ping, because it's going to gain you 3 life. Because it deals 1 damage to each opponent.
Yeah, that's spicy. That's spicy.
Yeah, it's not bad. It gains back a little bit of life. It's not like my favorite spirit in the deck, but it does ping everybody. I'm going to keep coming back to that.
Yeah.
It doesn't look very good, but with the commander, it is dealing damage. It is, sort of like a Firebrand Archer trigger every turn.
I mean, most well-made synergistic lists do suffer when the commander's not on the battlefield. This isn't really a format where you're like building a whole deck and the commander doesn't matter. That really doesn't happen too much. Kami of False Hope, that's a great one. People run that one anyway because it's just sack, prevent combat damage, it's a nice fog, and then obviously you ping, and you don't have to tap it, so it can be pinged and then sacrificed after, which is great.
Absolutely.
Scorched Vasalka, which you brought up earlier, it's another pay red sack a creature, it does 1 damage, so you don't have to sack it, you sack a token. That's cool.
Yeah, you can. Scorched Vasalka is a little bit of a finisher. Like, after the table has gotten down, like I've killed off.
Sack your whole board.
Be like, all right, sack my board. Deal like 3 or 4 extra damage and close out the game that way. Yeah.
Right.
And then there's there's Keening Apparition and Kami of Ancient Law, which I can sacrifice to destroy an enchantment. A surprising amount of relevant enchantments in the format. People are playing backgrounds. People are playing
Pestilence.
Things like Pestilence, for sure. Land Auras from Gretchen. Wilson Far Traveler. We mentioned Hive's deck earlier, and they play a bunch of auras to put on the bear. So
if you're playing anything that's Voltron-y like that, or even what's the one? The one you used to play, the Enchantress.
Enchanter.
Yeah, like
Satyr
that
Enchanter.
plays plenty of that kind of stuff too.
Yeah,
probably always a target. Yeah. And when there isn't, it's doing damage, like you said.
And when it isn't, it's a pinger. So there you go.
I'm seeing a couple more. Blood Age General. This one is a 2/2 and taps to give your attacking spirits +1/+. So that's kind of cool in case you do need to finish stuff off with combat.
When your commander's not around, Blood Age General can get in some extra damage. Also really good with the few untapped spells that I have. So can like double pump that way, and also, so you cast, for instance, something like War Flare, which gives all your creatures +2/+1, and you get to untap them. So you can like tap Blood Age General, pump your spirits, untap everybody, ping with your spirits because they got triggered by the War Flare, and just it can add up to a bunch of damage, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, that's pretty spicy. And then it looks like there's one more. It's a Pilgrim of the Ages. It's a 2 and a white for a 2/1. When it ETBs, you can search for a Plains. That's nice. Mana fixing is always good. And then for 6, you can return it from grave to hand. So repeatable.
That has never come up.
Lands.
That has never come up. But the fact that it can get a land isn't terrible. It's, again, not my favorite spirit. It is a little bit expensive for what it does. But I thought I would run it and try it. I did want to make sure that I had after running all of the pingers that I had access to, basically, I wanted to make sure I also had some extras on top of that were spirits that could be turned into pingers. So Pilgrim of the Ages just kind of wound up in the deck that way. But if I were making changes to the deck, I could see that one being swapped out for something else at some point.
I do see it being somewhat okay as well, too, because you have, I mean, it's a lot of mana to return it from grave to hand, but there are those games that go long where you do have the mana and nothing better to do, and maybe this got pitched early on to a thrill because it has that clause, so it's not entirely gone. But yeah, not bad. So that pretty much covers the actual spirits that are in the list, and then you've already said you're running your other pingers, you're running your extort creatures, you're running the Suture Priest, which is like you play it in every white deck because you got to.
Also kind of a pinger. Kind of a pinger.
Yep. Heliod's Pilgrim, that goes and gets an aura. What do you usually target with that? One of the protections?
So there is, so I have a small aura package. I have Benevolent Blessing and Chomano's Blessing, which are both protection and can go on an opponent's creature. It can try and stop an Abdel from being flickered. It can try and stop a Freed from the Real. So depending on the matchup, those are
kind of like binds where you can use it on somebody else's thing to stop a thing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Exactly, yeah. And then I have 3 removal auras, Petrify and Reprobation, which turn off activated abilities as well as making them more or less not be able to attack. And Temporal Isolation, which you can put on a pinger to prevent it from dealing damage. So if someone's got a Kessig Flame Breather in play or whatever, you can Temporal Isolation it and make sure that it's not going to ping you anymore.
Nice.
As well as giving it shadow and preventing all damage. So, like, if you throw it on a Dargo, that winds up being pretty good for you because Dargo is now nothing. It's not going to be able to hit you.
Right.
So, yeah, that's just the small aura package. I think Heliod's Pilgrim, like being a tutor in the format and being able to go and get a variety of things in a format that doesn't have a whole lot of like search effects like that. Yeah. It's a thing that I like when I'm playing white. I like having access to that sort of thing. So it's a 3-mana cantrip that will always get you a relevant spell, basically.
There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with having options to get your stuff out. I try to play whatever tutor effects I can in the decks that can play them. Yeah. So yeah. So you mentioned a couple cards earlier, but let's go over those that are kind of what we'll call your spirit support, aka they're not a spirit body, but they do something that helps spirits. So you've got your Rousing of Souls and Triplicate Spirits, those types of things. So are there any other ones that we haven't talked about yet? Or, well, I guess, first of all, like Triplicate Spirits, most people probably know, but it is a spell that just gives you 3 1/1 white spirits with flying, which is good because I don't think any of your other spirits had flying. So getting some evasive attackers is good. I mean, obviously, you're more likely just using them to ping around, but in the cases of giving them the +1/+0 from the other guy, now all of a sudden you've got 6 damage flying at somebody and they don't have evasion or a way to block. Then yeah, cool. The Rousing of Souls, that one is different, but kind of reminds me of those tempt cards. But so it's got Parlay. Each player reveals the top card of his or her library. For each non-land card revealed this way, you make a 1/1 with flying in a spirit. So, and then each player draws a card. So it is card draw, which sucks for ever giving the card draw away, but could make you a few.
Yeah. Obviously the nuts with Rousing the Souls is 3 mana, make 4 1/1 flyers, which are also pingers.
Right.
And adding, that's 4 damage to each opponent each turn when you're being able to ping with them, which is an insane card for 3 mana. Yes, you're giving your opponent cards, but you can't trip off of it yourself, so you get a card back as well. I don't know. It's swingy because you never know what's on top of somebody's library, but even getting 2 spirits isn't bad. 3 is obviously great, and 4 is insane. So,
well, it's also kind of additional information too. Like, yes, you're giving them a card, but you know what it is because it's revealed. It's true. So, if it does tell the table, like, hey, he just drew combo piece and it wasn't you. So, like, maybe even takes their attention off of what you're doing. Like, yeah, you just got 4 pingers, but he's got the thing he needs to win the game. So kill him.
It's true. It's true. Yeah.
And politics are weird in that sense that, just adding a little tiny bit of information, even when people screw up and go, oh, I'm going to play this thing. And then they go, oh, no, I can't do that. And you're like, I remember you have that now. So, what are some other spicy includes that you'd want to highlight that you think are just slam dunks in the deck?
Well, I don't know if it's a slam dunk, but as far as spicy goes, I wanted to try out Boros Fury Shield. Especially since there have been like Wilson Far Traveler's been a thing recently. I'm always worried about somebody, sleeping up Dargo Ketis because that deck is very scary
Yeah.
and has been kind of underplayed lately. But as far as Voltron threats go, Lobert was on Sphinx Summoner, which always runs cranial plating and always seems to have cranial plating. Every time I play against Lobert, it's like I'm swinging for 10 at you. So Boros Fury Shield is a 3-mana instant. You prevent all combat damage that would be dealt by target attacking or blocking creature this turn. And if you pay a red to play, it deals damage to that creature's controller equal to the creature's power. So I really just want to
shut off a Dargo and then hit them for 7. That's pretty.
I just want to get somebody with it.
That is spicy.
Good. I don't know if it's good. There may be something better in the deck.
So I mean, it's not
below, but.
It's not a fog, so I mean, it doesn't like if they're swinging their full army at you. Yeah, you're preventing one thing that might not be good enough, but yeah, that Christmas land of that Dargo or whatever is suited up, and you just throw it back at them. That's pretty good. It's kind of like deflecting palm, I think it is. There's a couple Boros style cards that do the same sort of thing. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Wildest thing I saw in one dumb game, there's like this flash in, I think it's a white creature, and it like absorbs damage and makes it gives it 1/1 counters. Basically, yes. I saw somebody try to Aetherflux Reservoir, another player, and they flashed that in, and it became a 51/51 or whatever, and then they turned around and killed the person with it. It was hilarious. So, yeah, those gotcha moments are great.
Again, like, could there be a better card in the deck? Maybe, but I want to do it. I want to live the dream. So I'm running it at the moment. Other cards that are kind of spicy. I'm running Shields of Velasvel and Volatile Claws, which like give my creatures a little bit of a buff, but also give them all creature types. So for instance,
that's a good idea.
Yeah, that'll turn my Basilica Guards, my Gutter Sniper, whatever, into a spirit, and then it'll be able to tap to deal a bit of extra damage as well.
I mean, you've got 20 creatures, and, I think it was like 6 of them were spirits and the rest aren't. So, yeah, I mean, every little bit that you can now all of a sudden just tap your whole board and do, 12 damage or something is pretty spicy.
Those are a couple cards that I wanted to highlight that I think are pretty solid in the deck.
Yeah, a lot of what I'm seeing here too is all kind of not staples, but cards that we see. You've got your some of your impulse draw. You've got a lot of the what you would think of as far as the protection spells and the bolts and frostbites and things like that. Abrade. It does sound like there's a lot more going with the list than I initially thought. Because a lot of these cards, again, on paper, you look at them and you're like, what does this do? And once it's explained by the guy who thought the whole process through, it makes a lot more sense. You said you had basically only goldfished and you just went into this tournament with this deck pretty much, like not really having played it. Through your playtime, did you find any weaknesses with the list that like you're thinking about changing? I know you mentioned maybe cutting that Pilgrim of the Ages, but that's not really something that would have impacted a game either way.
Sure, right. There are certain cards that I think are not as good as I would have hoped, and that I'm interested in swapping out for other things. That's always a thing that's going to happen.
Yeah.
New sets are going to get released too, and I'm sure there'll be different things that.
Oh, that's basically the next question. So we'll leave speculation out right now.
Overall, like again, I think that pingers are a pretty good place to be in the meta, and this is a deck that can make a lot of pingers.
Right.
Normally pingers, you're sort of limited to like, well, I played my 2-mana Kessig Flame Breather. I'll play my, next turn I'll play a Gutter Sniper or whatever. But this is like, I have so many 1-drop pingers as well. I have Triplicate Spirits, which will make me 3 pingers out of nowhere. I think there's something there. And like we've mentioned before, like I looked at cPDH.guide, great website, very good resource. Check it out. There's like 4 games listed for Lorehold Apprentice. They're all me, and they're all from this tournament. Like nobody has picked up this deck. Nobody's tried to play it competitively before. So I'm sure there's a lot of room for improvement and innovation. This is just like, this is where I was before the tournament. I was like, I think this deck has some legs to it. I want to try it out and see how it goes. And I was able to win 2 matches, which is all that I needed in this tournament because it was a small one.
Right.
So,
I mean, looking at it in
spot.
kind of how you've described it, I'd say probably the biggest weakness I can see is just board wipes.
Yeah.
Per se, you know, if you've got 6 1/1s out and somebody can hit them all, that is a pretty sort of big setback. How did you feel with like card draw and stuff? Because I feel like in a lot of my decks, like I'll have a good hand and it'll do some things, but then I come towards mid game and if you don't draw into any of your cantrips or anything, you're kind of just spinning your wheels. I mean, this does have that backup plan of like if you at least got out 3 or 4 spirits, you do have that pretty much every time you can cast a spell, you've got some damage out. But if you're not drawn, you're not really able to, you know, capitalize off of the commander's ability. So how did that feel? Like, did you kind of always have hands that were at least getting some cards back in them, or did you feel like at some points you kind of stalled out?
Yeah, so one of the things that I decided to go with in this version of the list is I was very worried about card draw. Like I'm not running Malcolm Caddis where I can run all the big blue card all the big blue card draw spells. I can't run Ophidian Eye to turn my pingers into something that's going to draw me 3 cards every time.
Oh man, that'd be so good.
That would be so good. So instead what I did is I ran like the impulse card draw things. I ran Thrill of Possibility, but I also have a bunch of like 1-mana cantrips like Crimson Wisps and Expedite, where it's a card that replaces itself right away. I don't have to. It's not putting me down any cards, and it's pinging everybody. You know, I just get to shoot everybody with it.
Right.
And that was kind of the solution that I stumbled upon was like, I just need spells. I need the velocity more than I need like something that'll draw me like 3 or 4 cards all at once. Right. I just want the velocity of the deck to keep going because every time I cast a spell, I'm going to be dealing damage to everybody. So if I can Crimson Wisp something and draw that card back, that's perfectly fine with me. I'll have another spell, hopefully, or another pinger that I can then deploy and keep this chain going.
Right.
So that was.
I mean, I think that's kind of everybody's idea, and then in a perfect world, that's just how every deck works. Is you're just slowly, you know, accruing value, and you're always drawing. But man, like I said, I've had some situations where I feel like you hit this wall, and you're just not drawing anything, or you're just drawing lands or whatever, and it's like, man, I just can't do anything, and then somebody just wins or whatever the case may be. So I was just curious because I know, like you said. Blue is like, at least in this format, is kind of the only one that has a ton of just draw card effects. Where like red has some of it, but a lot of it is, you know, going even or going down because you have to discard. Which doesn't matter if you've got recursion or you're in the right colors, but yeah, again, the only deck that I have that consistently always has cards is Sivrus. That's just because the commander consistently refills my hand. So, and I kind of got spoiled after I built that deck, and then I started playing some other colors and lists and things, and I'm like, man, a lot of the times, no matter how much I consider, like, I'm going to put all of these card draw effects in a deck, you still have that wall sometimes, and it pisses me off, but, you know, I guess that's what testing and everything else, you know, leads to finding more answers. And then again, more things get printed all the time. So eventually you get those answers. So yeah, I guess we already kind of alluded to it, but speculation wise, like what are some cards like, well, you basically said, if you could get a white or red Ophidian Eye, that would be a card you definitely put in the list. But,
absolutely.
Outside of something like that is probably not going to get printed. What are like more effects, like maybe better spirits or something else that, you know, helps you draw more cards? Like what would be some of the cards that you might already be considering or you might want to get printed in future sets that would help this list out?
I'd love a Midnight Haunting downshift. Midnight Haunting from, I believe it was Innistrad, but it's a 3-mana instant, make 2 1/1 spirit tokens with flying. That's unfortunately an uncommon, has been reprinted in like some commander decks, I think, has always been an uncommon. Would love it as a common, just because it does everything the deck wants to do. You know, end step, I can trigger the thing, I make 2 more pingers. That's like the perfect card for this deck.
Right.
We are going to Duskmourn later this year, which is like a big haunted house themed set.
No, that might help. Yeah, spirits.
Like, I hope there will be some sweet spirits there. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what that has to offer.
Knowing wizards, they'd go and name them. They'd type them as ghosts or something stupid.
Yeah,
like, I can't even use them.
They'll all just be horrors or something.
Yeah.
And yeah, I won't be able to use anything. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what that set has to offer, and hopefully there will be something that I can slot into this deck because I do really enjoy it, and I will be working on it in the future. I've been talking with a few other people in the community a little bit. South Lakes Vibes sent me their version of Lorehold Apprentice, and we've been talking a little bit. I got a few ideas from him, so yeah, there's definitely things that I hadn't considered before. And now that the deck list is out in the open, because again, I had just sort of been building it in the dark by myself and,
Right.
you know, kind of hunkered over in my cave, like putting this list together for the tournament. But now that it's out in the open and people have seen it, I'm definitely looking forward to getting more feedback on it and having people be like, hey, did you consider this? What about this card? And I love that.
I have some thoughts, but I don't know if they are commons. I know that there was a cycle, and I want to say it was original or second Innistrad block from 10 years ago plus. There was a cycle of cards that they were like humans, but they would die and make spirits, or you could, when they hit your grave, they made a spirit, or there was some activated. Also, in the more recent Innistrad stuff with Disturb, I don't know how many there may or may not have been that were at common level, but there were some Disturb, creatures, so to speak, that might provide additional value. I know some of them were kind of like your Eidolon here, where it was like, instead of Bestow, it's Disturb, and it basically is just an aura and goes onto a creature. Sure. That may provide lifelink or something else, which you've already proven can be a good thing. And yeah, again, I don't remember if that cycle of creatures was like that. Also, wasn't it like Hunted Witness or something? One of those types, I want to say, also makes a spirit
when it died. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, those would be the only suggestions I had to try and maybe up the density of spirits, but I also see why you don't want to run too many creatures, because you need to have the instants and sorceries for your commander. So yeah, it's a give and take. But
yeah, as I was talking with South Lakes Vibes, as I'd mentioned, he had been running some of the buyback spells, which is, it kind of turns into an engine in the late game. There's a card called Anoint that it prevents 3 damage to a creature for 1 white, but you can buy back it for 3. So early on, somebody tries to lightning bolt your commander, you're just like, haha, no, I protect it. Right. But late game, you can just keep casting it for 4 and triggering all of your creatures, and that sort of gets around the card draw problem. And I thought that was a really, there's Flame Jab as well, which is a retrace spell. So if you're drawing lands late into the game, you can just use those, turn it into damage, turn it into pings. I thought those were really smart, and that was a thing I hadn't considered before. So
anything that might have flashback, jumpstart, yada yada, like I said, Disturb, any of those things that can be triggered out of your graveyard for extra value, and if they count as a cast, like I know flashback does, not everything does, but if it's not just an activated ability and it is a flashback thing, that might be something to consider as well, just for the additional trigger. I like spells that are moldal, and I like spells that are repeatable in some fashion, so I think those are obviously good things to look at. One last question to kind of wrap this up. I think we have a pretty good at least I do now, a pretty good understanding of how this thing wrapped up, or the deck works now. The last question I have for you is, and I know that it's now several days removed, but was there any cool, memorable interactions that happened with this deck in the tournament when you were playing? Like something that stood out to you as being really cool and something you'd like to share outside of winning the whole thing?
Yeah, I did get to do one of my favorite things in the format, and that is mess around with other people's combats. I was able to. I love it when player A attacks player B, and I'm sitting there as player C, and it's like, hold on, I have interaction before blocks, and I get to take out some blockers, and I was able to take out a player with somebody else's gut skeleton token because they were swinging in for an attack that wasn't going to be lethal, and I was like, let me get a couple blockers out of the way there and turn that skeleton into lethal damage. So
ouch. Yeah, that's
doing that.
I'm sure that player was not happy with you, but I understand that sometimes removing someone else is good. And then you didn't really, you spent resources, of course, but you didn't have to go all in on getting rid of them. And if they were somebody that could have been a threat to you, then that's even better. Again, not going to make any friends, but
definitely not a. they were for sure a threat to me. And also, my last card in hand was Rally the Righteous, which is sort of a trumpet blast effect. So I knew that I would be able to turn around and kill the gut player with like this trumpet blast after I took out the first player with their skeleton token. So I had it all lined up, and I was just very fortunate that my hand was good enough to take out one player and then turn around and take out the player that killed them too. So
yeah, it ended up where nobody could do anything about it, and Magical Christmas Land was yours.
absolutely, yeah, yeah.
I mean, those are, and to be in a tournament setting, no less. That's awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the deck, I think it has legs. I mean, I don't know necessarily that I have anything else to suggest. I might toy around with it in my free time at some point. I do like kind of getting to know some of these newer decks when they come out. Like you said, sometimes, when you goldfish, you'll goldfish multiple lists just to, kind of get a feel for all of them and learn their ins and outs. So that's kind of something I like to do too, is just at least goldfish decks that are doing stuff and you might see, because then you can understand them a little better. Although having this conversation kind of ironed out some of the stuff that I was unsure about. So thank you for that. Once again, congratulations on your win. Hopefully you'll get another one in the future and we'll do another one of these. But for now, that is all I have. I will make sure that the deck list is in the show notes. Again, coming up on Tuesday the 14th, myself, David here, Clay, and a fourth guest or fourth player to be determined. That's going to happen. And I'll also have in the show notes the prior interview with David here with Clay, so you can get to know him a little bit more as a person. And hopefully this kind of showcased his tournament winning deck. And that's, again, all I have for today. Thanks y'all for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And we'll see you sometime in the future. Take care.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
For sure.